again, my little yarnivores and spiderettes and arachnids. Fiber Spider back again with another tutorial just for you. And today we've got ourselves a lovely lacy knitted stitch, the cell stitch. Very, very simple, awesome for wraps, scarves, blankets, what have you. It's very, very simple with only a 4-row repeat, and 2 of those rows are just purl stitches. So it's very, very simple. And the other 2 rows where you're doing the patterning on the right side, well, it's the same row, essentially. It's just offset. And I'm going to explain that because for me, it's not just telling you what the pattern is, but why we're doing what we're doing in the pattern. So don't worry, we will get into that. And for this particular swatch, I used, looking for the colorway. This is Straw, the straw colorway of Lion Brand's Pound of Love. This video is not sponsored, but always like to let you know what it is that I use in case if you want to duplicate the results. For this swatch, I used 10.5 sized knitting needles and going to be using the same thing today, same yarn, different colorway. We're going to be using the old Oxford Gray, one of my favorites in Pound of Love. And without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, so I already have a small swatch, which we're going to be utilizing today. For casting on your stitches, you're going to need a multiple of 3 stitches for this particular stitch. Now, I did the knitted cast on, one of my favorite ways of casting on. You could, of course, do long tail or what have you, but the knitted cast on, I'm going to put a link to that in the description box down below, and then we can get started. Now, these I'm using right now, I'm using actually double-pointed needles. It's a little bit easier for me for tutorial purposes. I just have caps on the ends here so that my stitches do not slide off. Yeah, so that being said, do your cast on, multiple of 3, and we'll be good to go. All right. Okay, row 1 as well as row 3. Like I said, every other row is just purl stitches. So, it's a nice little break in between. So for the first row, after doing your cast on, start off with a purl row. So needle through the front and purl through the front, wrap and bring through another purl stitch. Just all of your stitches for this row, all purl stitches. Very, very simple. Just, going through this initially, and then later on, I'm just going to, say, well, this row, purl all of your stitches. And since I don't have too terribly many, just 15, I figure I can do this on camera with you guys. And just a couple more. Alrighty. So that is row 1, and will also be row 3 when we get there. So that is our first row. And now we're going to be on the right side working with the actual knitted pattern. All right. Okay, row 2. So this is the right side of the piece. Now for row 2, start off by knitting your first 2 stitches. In fact, this is the same regardless of whether it's a row 2 or a row 4, you always start off by knitting the first 2 stitches. Okay, and then knit the next 2 stitches together. Yarn over and knit 1. And that is the repeat for the rest of this row. Knit 2 stitches together. Yarn over and knit 1. Knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 1. Knit 2 together. Yarn over and knit 1, and then knit the last stitch. So that's the knit 1, and then knit this last stitch like so. And then for row 3, I'm going to purl my way back across, and I will meet back up with you for row 4. Okay, so row 4, I'm going to start by knitting the first 2 stitches. Like I said, regardless of what row you knit the first 2, whether it is row 2 or row 4, knit the first 2. And then we're going to start with a yarn over this time. So yarn over, then knit 1, and then knit 2 together. Okay, yarn over, knit 1, and knit 2 together. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, I thought that the rows were offset. Actually, they are, because the way that the eyelets are positioned, it's slightly shifted, it's staggered. And I will explain that when we do our repeat. Okay, so I did my yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together. Okay, then yarn over, knit 1, and knit 2 together. Because you guys know I am going to do a repeat. I always do repeats. Okay, almost there. Yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together, and then knit that last stitch. There we go. So that is the end of row 4. So I'm going to purl my way back across for the equivalent of row 1. Then I will meet back up with you so that we can do the repeat of rows 2 and 4, and I will give a more in-depth explanation about how the pattern works. Okay, so before we go any further, and then I do the repeat, tangibly, when you look at the pattern, you start off with a knitting of 2, and then knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, etc., etc., and then you end up knitting the last stitch. Now, if you go on to row 4, you start off again with the knit 2, and then you start off with that eyelet, the yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together, etc., etc., knitting 1 at the end. Now, if you repeat these stitches, knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, over and over and over again. So knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1. So that right there, that is row 2 ad infinitum. Now, row 4, it's the same thing. It's just shifted over, starting off with the yarn over, knit 1, knit 2 together. So if you can sort of compute that, internally, that, yeah, you're just starting at a different spot. You're shifting things over so that the eyelets are offset. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you with the knitting, being able to identify where you're at with the stitches so that it'll be even easier to comprehend. I hope that this little explanation here helps. It's just how me and my brain works. All right, so let's get into the actual repeat. Okay, so row 2 for the repeat. As always, we're going to start off by knitting our first 2 stitches. Nothing new there. Okay, now the 2 different kinds of rows that we have, there's the one that starts off with the eyelet, like we have right down there, and the other one that starts off with the knit 2 together. Row 2 starts off with a knit 2 together. Now, as far as identifying where you're at in your piece, this comes in handy later when perhaps you're not keeping track of what row you're on, or etc., or you just, forgot to mark your counter. This right here is our eyelet, which means that this row that we're doing right now, we are going to need to do a knit 2 together. Another way of knowing what you need to do is, as you can see here, we have a solid grouping of stitches right here. And by knitting these 2 together and then doing a yarn over, it opens this up, just like down 2 rows below, we have an eyelet down here. So it's going to keep up with the symmetry. So we're going to knit these 2 together. And yarn over, creating an eyelet just like we had down below. So yarn over, and then knit 1. And now you can see that we have this grouping of stitches. So if we go in between them with an eyelet, it means that we have to decrease these 2 together. So if you get sort of distracted mid-row, you'll know where you're at. So knitting these 2 together, yarn over, and knit the next stitch. Okay, again, going in between these with an eyelet, but we need to decrease these 2 first. So knit these 2 together. And then yarn over to open it up and knit the next stitch. Okay, and we're going to do it one more time. Going to open these stitches up with an eyelet in between. So knit these 2 together. yarn over, knit one, and then knit that last stitch. Okay, so again, for row 3, I'm going to purl my way back across, and I'll meet back up with you for the repeat of row 4. Okay, so row 4 for the repeat. Now, if you look at your stitches here, you can see that right now we have, it's a bit solid right here, whereas down here we have an eyelet. Now we need to duplicate that eyelet from down there up here. So as always, we're going to be knitting those first 2 stitches, and then we'll get into the patterning. So knit the first 2. And then we're going to yarn over, knit 1, and then we can get into our decreasing, because as you can see here, we have this solid grouping of stitches here. So we need to decrease these next 2 stitches together so that we can create an eyelet in between them. So knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1. Again, we have a solid grouping of stitches here. So we need to go in between them. So decrease these 2 together, and then we'll do our eyelet right on top. So knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 1. And we're going to do that again, separating these by knitting these 2 together and creating an eyelet right here. So knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 1. Okay, and then we need to knit these 2 together, but then we have our end stitch. So knit these 2 together and then knit the last stitch. So knitting these 2 together, and then knit the last stitch. All right. Now there are, of course, little tricks as far as knitting lace. For a rectangular piece like we're doing here, for every increase, every eyelet is basically an added stitch. So if you want to maintain your stitch count, for every added stitch, you need to have a decrease. Now, there are a number of ways of decreasing. Fortunately for this stitch, it's just one kind of decrease, which is the knit 2 together. And another thing, to try to keep in mind is whenever you do a knit 2 together, the following stitch is always going to be a yarn over, regardless of whether it's row 2 or row 4. And I really hope that, my sort of in-depth explanation, gave some clarity to this, because I know perfectly well that knitting lace can be intimidating. For the longest time, I was terrified. It didn't make any sense to me. But if you can look at your stitches and, try to be able to identify what you did, it makes a lot more sense in the long run. It takes time, it takes observation, it takes time, and it takes practice, not gonna lie, but it's worth it. So in this case, I would say you get out of it what you put into it. And I am so glad that I got over the hump, because I love lace knitting. It's gorgeous, and you can do so many things with it, including the cell stitch. So yeah, all you have to do for this particular stitch is just keep repeating rows 1 through 4 until your piece is finished. Another thing that you can do is that, if you're not fond of the edge, what you could do is start your piece with additional stitches on either side of your patterning to create a border. So what I would do if I wanted to create a border would be to add, say, perhaps anywhere up to, say, 5 stitches on either side. So after doing your multiple of 3 stitches, I would then add, say, 10 stitches to that, and then you would start off your piece just by doing garter stitch. So it's just knit stitches back, forth, back, forth, back, forth for a bunch of rows for the bottom of the frame. And then at the beginning of each row, the beginning and ending of each row, you would start off by knitting 5 stitches. You would do your patterning and then knit the last 5 stitches on your needle. And then when you're doing a purl row, a wrong side row like this, you would start off by knitting the first 5, doing your purls all the way across, and then knit the last 5, so that you have a garter stitch border all the way around your piece. And then, when your piece is long enough, you would stop doing your patterning here, and then you would do the equivalent number of rows that you did initially down at the bottom. Just knit back, forth, doing the garter stitch for the top for a while, and then do your bind off. Personally, I like the Stretchy Bind Off. I'm going to put a link to that in the description box down below as well. And you can have more of a framed piece, which I think would look really, really nice if you were to do perhaps a blanket utilizing this stitch. And there you go. Just a little, couple more, tips, tricks, and insights to perhaps, help you on your way. So there you go. Alrighty, my dears, so that is going to conclude my tutorial on the knitted cell stitch. Really hope that you liked it, and if you did, please give a little thumbs up button down below. You know that I appreciate your appreciation as always. And let me know what you think of this particular stitch. What are you going to do with it? Some sort of fabulous garment, a blanket, what have you. Always interested in your feedback and your creative journey. So, until next time, you know what to do, right? I want all of you to stay inspired, stay caffeinated, stay stitching, and please stay safe. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you in my next video. Bye for now, everybody, and have a great day.